Alright guys, I'm going to try to keep this video short for Facebook. I had a couple people commenting on the reloading pages there about Buckshot for specifically 20 gauge, what fits, best performance, pattern, and fitment with a shot cup that has the pedals on instead of just a buffered load. These are game load, Winchester game loads. They come 7.5, 8, 6 shot, fairly cheap. They're basically an AA-20. They have the tapered base wad, Winchester primer, and an AA-20 one-piece cushion wad in there. Basically, I'm not reloading these all the way from primer, powder, wad up. I'm taking factory ammo, taking the shot out, and then replacing it with buckshot and buffer. I do it all with hand tools. I used to reload. I had a lot of presses when I used to shoot trap and skeet. But with the cost of reloading now and what I'm trying to do for my specific needs, I don't need that. I can make the loads I want just for the 20 gauge. But number 2 buck does fit well in 20 gauge. This is ballistics product, nickel plated number 2 buck. It's spec'd at like .268, which is, common spec on number 2 bucks, .27, 27 caliber. But it does stack well in a regular target load shot cup. 12 pellets plus buffer. It's coming out like right at .850, so you're just a hair under 7/8 of an ounce, which is the original payload, which is a 12 pellet load. Works great on the 20 gauge, not too much recoil. Definitely plenty of power for a defense round. And you get really, really good patterns with that wad and buffer. You can stack it in 2s or 3s. Fits in there fine. The stack height is the same. I got them marked here. I mark all my shells with colored tops. I just do the top of the crimp because that's a good spot where it won't get rubbed off. And it's just quick to tell, okay, red for buckshot. Then I use purple for number 2 lead. The green is for the stacked in 3s. The red stacked in 2s. So, just so I know for testing. But you can see stacked in 2s or 3s, it's the same. It sits like maybe a hair lower stacked in 3s. The 20 gauge bore itself acts as a choke with the larger shot sizes, like buckshot, especially number 2 buck. So you're going to be getting denser patterns out of cylinder choke, with a number 2 stack like this, versus like the 12 gauge. The 12 gauge bore, you tend to have to choke it more, especially for the equal amount of pellets, like 12 pellets versus 12 pellets. The 20 gauge really handles the 12 pellet number 2 buck well. It keeps them pretty tight together. Number 3 buck is the most common. Number 4 is pretty common. The problem with that shot size is if you're not using a choke, like a full choke, you're going to have a harder time keeping a hot kill zone area. Those shot sizes are small enough where they need to rely more on a choke. Number 2 buck is a large shot. It's contained by the bore, more constricted by the bore, so it tends to chain the shot string more. It's the same with any shotgun. The 12 gauge is the same way. You put triple aught buck in there, it's gonna, tend to chain the shot more, where choke isn't gonna affect it as much as like number 4 buck. It's just something to think about. That's from my experience. Number 3 buck doesn't pattern that well out of my cylinder, 18-inch cylinder. But the number 2 buck patterns way better. And 3 stack versus 2 stack changes of the stacked in 3s out of the cylinder bore. It tends to donut the pattern a little bit more, where the X2 stack, you tend to get more pellets closer together in the center. Maybe you want that wider pattern, more of a ring. It just depends on what your specific needs are. But yeah, any 7/8 ounce shot cup, birdshot, reloading wad, AA20, clay buster is going to work just fine for a 7/8 20 gauge number 2 buck load. I use the Buffer 2.5cc scoop. That brings the weight up a little bit, as well as helps to tighten the patterns. And that'll bring it up just shy of that 7/8 ounce. But you should be able just to load standard load data for a 7/8 ounce birdshot load, and you're going to be perfectly fine doing that. You start getting into like 1 ounce loads, then you got to look at slower powders, different wads, longer wads, and it's going to be a little more difficult to get the stack height correct, because you're going to have to add more pellets. With Buckshot, because of the size of the pellets, you need more space the more you add. So because of the density difference of the smaller shot, so it's a little bit harder once you try to get up to that like 1 ounce 20 gauge loader, 1 ounce and 1/8. If you're trying to go crazy with like a 20 pellet load or something. But in a standard 2 3/4 target load, like I said, the 7/8 of an ounce 12 pellet number 2 buck works great, fits great, specs out good for weight. But just wanted to show you guys that. Just the 20 gauge isn't really talked about that much. There's hardly any good buckshot out there for the 20 gauge, which is why I started making my own. I also make number 2 lead loads because that's not available. I'm trying to make stuff that I can't buy. The number 2 lead is great for, have a little more knockdown power, but still get a denser pattern. I maybe like a drone defense load. But yeah, guys, just thought I'd share. 20 gauge is a nice little nice gauge. It handles buckshot fine. You just have to know what to use. But thanks, guys.